A condom in the bathroom trash. That's not what you expect to find in your home after 20 years of married life. Especially when you had a vasectomy 10 years ago. This wasn't the kind of discovery that happens in movies, where everything explodes in one dramatic scene. It was quieter than that. More insidious. It was the first real piece of evidence that something had fundamentally shifted in the foundation of our marriage. Not a crack, a chasm. My name is Sebastian, and I've spent the last 16 years as a cinematographer. Working with a camera teaches you to see details that other people miss. Composition, lighting, the way people move when they think no one's watching. All of it tells a story, often something completely different from what they're saying out loud. And when I started looking at Lily with those same eyes, the story became painfully clear. My wife works as a production manager at one of the larger companies in the Tampa Bay area. She's always been confident, ambitious, driven. The kind of woman who walks into a room and people naturally gravitate toward her. When we met at a friend's party 2 decades ago, I remember thinking that I'd found something rare. She had this energy, this presence that just drew people in. 20 years. That's a substantial portion of a human life. We'd built something real during those 2 decades. Not just a marriage, a life. Shared routines, inside jokes, the kind of comfort that comes from truly knowing another person. Or so I thought. Clearwater had become our home 8 years ago. The Island Estates neighborhood specifically. 3 bedrooms, a view of the water, everything we said we needed for our final years before retirement. The house cost around $650,000. We chose it together, Lily and I, during one of those perfect Saturday afternoons when everything feels possible. She promised me it would be our last major project, our final investment together. Our cat, Kevin, a ginger Tom with amber eyes, had made the house feel like home in a way no amount of furniture ever could. He was 7 years old, lazy and affectionate, the kind of presence that grounds a household. But spring 2024 brought subtle shifts. Nothing obvious. Nothing that would have alarmed most people. Small things. Lily would start to say something to me and then stop mid-sentence as if reconsidering. She'd smile, excuse herself, and disappear. Her phone, which used to sit on the kitchen counter, now traveled with her everywhere, even to the bathroom. These weren't the kinds of changes that would make headlines. They could have been work stress. Could have been anything. But I'd spent my career watching people, learning to read what wasn't being said. When you frame human stories through a lens every day, you develop an instinct for when something's off. When the composition of someone's life is becoming unbalanced. There were moments when I'd talk to her, and I could see her attention elsewhere. Not hostile, not dismissive, just absent. When her phone would buzz, there'd be this micro-expression, this tiny shift in her eyes before she'd compose herself. She'd make sudden excuses to leave the room. Her moods would swing wildly, cheerful one moment, withdrawn the next, usually triggered by something on that phone she kept so close. I told myself it was nothing. That I was reading too much into things, letting my professional habits bleed into my personal life. But that instinct, the one that had made me good at my job, kept whispering that something wasn't right. My brother Owen and my sister Naomi would have said I was being paranoid. I'm not proud of it. But paranoia and intuition aren't always opposites. Sometimes they're the same thing wearing different clothes. April melted into May, and Lily's work calendar became chaotic in a way I'd never seen before. She talked constantly about corporate events, new partnerships, management seminars. One of these events was a master class in production management, being held at a hotel right here in Tampa, barely 20 minutes from our house. The irony of that proximity would only become clear to me later. That's where she met him. Tom. Just Tom. A translator brought in to work with international participants. He had the kind of credentials that looked impressive on paper. 5 languages, experience working with Fortune 500 companies, a voice that apparently carried authority even when speaking someone else's words. Lily mentioned him once in passing while we were having dinner. She said he'd translated for a Japanese manufacturing company, that he was very professional, that the conference had been useful. She exchanged contact information with him. Professional contact information, she said. For potential future projects involving international clients. 2 weeks later I found the condom. I was changing the bathroom trash bin, a mundane, ordinary task, when I saw it among the tissues and packaging. I held it with my fingertips like it was contaminated, like touching it might transmit something worse than disease. My mind refused to process what I was seeing. A vasectomy had made condoms obsolete in our marriage for a decade. We'd never discussed using them. We'd never had reason to. The only logical explanation was one I didn't want to acknowledge. I sat on the edge of the bathtub for a long time, just breathing. Kevin came in, circled my ankles and meowed for dinner. The normalcy of his presence in that moment felt obscene, like a betrayal of how broken everything actually was. That evening, Lily came home at 7:47 p.m., 19 minutes later than usual. She was carrying her work bag and a coffee cup from somewhere downtown. She smiled at me, asked about my day and went upstairs to change. The words she spoke were the same words she'd spoken thousands of times before. But they felt hollow now, like dialogue spoken by an actor who no longer believed in the character. I said nothing. Not that night. What followed were 2 weeks of careful, systematic investigation. I'm not proud of it. It felt cheap, invasive, the kind of thing I'd mock if I saw it in a film I was editing. But desperation makes you do things you'd judge harshly in anyone else. I checked our shared credit card accounts. Nothing obviously out of place, just the normal transactions at grocery stores and gas stations. Then I thought about Lily's personal laptop, the one where she kept her work files and scanned receipts for her own bookkeeping. The receipts I found were from hotels along the Clearwater coastline. The Tradewinds Resort. The Sandpearl. The Clearwater Bay Hilton. All on dates when Lily had told me she was at work. All on dates when she described being at meetings or client dinners. And all of them were for rooms booked under her name. I found Tom's number in her phone, buried in her contacts under professional consultations. I told myself that people really did communicate with professional contacts this way. Then I pulled up the message thread and found attachments, photos of the two of them at dinner at the beach. In one photo she was laughing, her head turned toward him, and I could see something in her expression that I hadn't seen in years. Not happiness, contentment was too mild a word. Joy. Pure, uncomplicated joy. The revelation wasn't explosive. It was cold. Clinical. Like watching someone else's documentary unfold. Tom lived on Avery Street, renting a small house about 3 miles from our home. Finding his address was absurdly easy. He had a public LinkedIn profile with his business information, photos from various translation conferences, recommendations from clients. He was 35, handsome in a generic way, the kind of man who probably made decent money and was probably charming at parties. By late June I'd compiled an extensive archive. I created folders on an encrypted external drive. I documented everything, the hotel receipts, the text messages, the photos. I built a timeline. I traced the growth of their relationship from that first contact in May to the increasingly intimate messages by June. I researched Tom's background thoroughly. He worked for several translation agencies, but his primary work came through a company called Global Speak International. Their client contracts specifically included clauses about professional ethics and conflicts of interest. The violation would be clear to any reasonable person. Then I did something I'm less proud of. I started researching what I could do about it. I created a detailed file. Every piece of evidence, organized chronologically. I found a financial advisor I'd worked with years ago, a man named Mike Goldman who'd always been straightforward with me. In a hypothetical conversation, I asked him about ways to protect assets in case of a separation. Not legally hiding money from a court, he assured me. I didn't want to do that. Just ensuring I had a separate safety net. He recommended bearer bonds. Completely legal but purchased through channels that kept them private. $40,000, purchased over several weeks to avoid drawing attention. I placed them in a safety deposit box at a bank downtown, using only my name. I built documentation on Tom. I found the contact information for Global Speak International. I researched their employee handbook, which I managed to find a copy of online. Thorough companies often post these things. There were clear protocols about fraternization with clients, about conflicts of interest, about the kinds of violations that could end someone's career in that field. And then I did something darker. I started writing a blog post. I didn't publish it, I just wrote it. 12,000 words, meticulously detailed. I described the entire affair, named names, cited dates and times. I wrote about Lily's career, about how she'd exploited the system, how she'd used company resources to facilitate her deception. I was thorough. I was angry. And it felt good, in the way that planning something destructive can feel good when you're consumed by betrayal. I drafted emails to Lily's major clients. Professional, neutral in tone, but filled with information about potential conflicts of interest within their accounts. I didn't send them. I just wrote them. Saved them in a folder marked, "Do not send." I found the contact information for Lily's parents. They lived in Georgia about 6 hours away. I imagined calling them, describing what their daughter had done, using the phone call as a way of expanding the damage beyond just our marriage. I researched the Association of Professional Translators and compiled what I called a file on Tom. Detailed professional misconduct allegations, citations of specific incidents, a carefully constructed narrative of someone unfit for his position. My computer became a repository for potential destruction. Hours of work, meticulous planning, all aimed at burning down everything connected to Tom and, in the process, burning down Lily's world too. I didn't sleep much during those weeks. In mid-July, I decided I couldn't carry this secret anymore. Not because I'd changed my mind about using it, I still felt capable of destroying her. But because living with it was consuming me. I told Lily I needed to talk about something important. We sat in our living room, the room where we'd spent countless evenings watching movies, reading, living the comfortable, ordinary life I'd thought was real. I showed her the condom. I showed her the hotel receipts. I showed her the messages, the photos, the timeline I'd built. I showed her everything except the revenge plans, those I kept to myself, a final card I hadn't decided whether to play. She didn't cry immediately. That surprised me. She went very still, her face becoming a mask I didn't recognize. She looked like someone who'd been physically struck but was still processing the impact. "How long have you known?" she asked quietly. 2 weeks. "And you didn't say anything?" I needed to be sure. I needed to understand what was happening. She stood up and walked to the window, her back to me. Outside, the Florida heat was oppressive, the sun bearing down relentlessly on the street below. Kevin jumped onto her lap and she didn't push him away, just stroked his fur mechanically as if the motion could ground her. When she turned back to face me, she was crying. Not angry tears, devastated tears. The kind of tears that come from watching something you built collapse in front of you. She told me everything. Not all at once. It came in fragments over the next few hours. She told me about the master class, about how Tom had made her laugh during a break, about how they'd exchanged numbers. She told me about the first meeting. Innocent, she insisted, just coffee at a downtown cafe. She told me about how that innocent coffee had turned into dinner, into late-night messages, into something that felt alive in a way our marriage hadn't felt alive in years. "I didn't plan it," she said. "I know that's what everyone says, but it's true. We were at this hotel networking event and he was there translating for some international clients and he sat down next to me and we just talked. About everything. About work, about life, about things I haven't discussed with anyone in so long. And it felt like being seen for the first time in years." She didn't sound like she was making excuses. She sounded like she was trying to explain something she didn't fully understand herself. "When did it become physical?" I asked, the words tasting metallic in my mouth. 2 months ago. At the Sandpearl. We'd been meeting for dinner every few weeks, always in towns far enough away that we wouldn't run into anyone from our lives. And one night. She trailed off. "I just wanted to feel something different. I know that's terrible. I know that's the worst excuse possible." She told me that Tom wasn't offering her future plans or declarations of love. He was offering novelty. He was offering the experience of being interesting again, of being pursued, of matching to someone in a way that felt new. She knew it was hollow. She knew it wouldn't last. But for a few hours every few weeks it felt real. "I love you," she said. "You have to know that. What I did, it wasn't about not loving you. It was about feeling dead inside and trying to find proof that I was still alive." The words should have comforted me. Instead they made me angry. Because she was describing years of unhappiness that I apparently hadn't noticed. Or worse, that I had noticed but had chosen to ignore, preferring the comfortable routine to the difficult work of actually staying connected to the person I'd married. That's when I told her what I'd prepared. I walked her through my plans methodically. I showed her the draft blog post. I showed her the emails to her clients. I showed her the file I'd compiled on Tom. I described, in clinical detail, exactly how I could burn down her career, her reputation, her relationships with her parents. I explained the bearer bonds, my strategy of ensuring I'd have resources that couldn't be divided in a divorce settlement. I wasn't trying to hurt her with this recitation. I was trying to make her understand the magnitude of what she'd done, how far I'd been willing to go in retaliation. When I finished, she was shaking. "Were you going to do it?" she asked. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "I think I needed to know I could. I think I needed to have the option even if I never used it." Then something happened that shifted everything. Lily asked me if I remembered my first marriage. I hadn't talked about those 5 years in a long time. It was a chapter of my life that felt ancient, belonging to a different version of myself. But the memory came flooding back. My first wife, Diana, and how our marriage had ended in a conflagration of betrayal and retaliation. We'd destroyed each other systematically, using every weapon we had, making sure the other suffered as much as possible. I'd spent years hating her, years planning for our chance encounters to hurt as much as possible. And I'd learned, over time, that revenge doesn't actually heal anything. It just creates a different kind of wound. Do you want to go through that again? Lily asked me. Because I think I do deserve that. I think I deserve to have my career ruined, my family destroyed, everything taken away. But do you want to be the person who does it? Do you want to spend the next 5 years in legal battles and anger just like last time? I didn't answer immediately. I sat with the question, really sat with it instead of dismissing it out of hand. My sister Naomi had always told me that people weren't binary, that we weren't simply good or bad, trustworthy or faithless. She'd sent me articles about forgiveness, about how the human capacity to move past betrayal was one of our greatest strengths. I dismissed her articles as naive, as suggesting that some betrayals were acceptable. But that wasn't what she'd been saying. She'd been saying that some situations could survive betrayal if both people were willing to do the necessary work. 20 years is a long time. Longer than 5. Longer than my first marriage had been. I don't want a divorce, I heard myself say. I don't know if that's the right choice, but I don't want it. Lily started crying again, real sobs this time, her entire body shaking. What followed was a series of difficult but necessary decisions. I called Tom. Not with anger in my voice, I was too tired for anger. I simply told him that I knew everything, that I expected him to have no further contact with Lily, and that I'd arranged for my attorney to send him documentation of this expectation. He apologized. He sounded genuinely frightened. He agreed immediately. 2 weeks later, Tom moved out of his rental on Avery Street. He relocated to Jacksonville, over 300 kilometers away, to a city where he had some family connections. I never saw him again, and to my knowledge, neither did Lily. I deleted the revenge blog. I deleted the draft emails. I deleted the file on Tom. It wasn't dramatic. No ceremonial burning of documents or deleting everything while staring meaningfully into the distance. I just clicked delete and confirmed the action. The bearer bonds, though, those I kept. That was my compromise with myself. I didn't use them. I didn't tell Lily about them. But I kept them as insurance, a reminder that some part of me still believed this could all fall apart again. Lily resigned from her position at the company where she worked. The severance package was decent, 3 months' salary plus benefits through the end of the year. She used those 3 months to search for a new job, preferably somewhere she wouldn't risk running into Tom or anyone who knew about the affair. She found a position with a smaller production company in St. Petersburg, a shift that meant she'd earn less money but would give her a fresh start. More importantly, she gave me access to her phone, her email accounts, her location data. She downloaded an app that showed me where she was at any given moment. It felt controlling, and I told her so. She insisted on it anyway. I want you to know where I am, she said. I want you to know I'm not lying. I want you to have proof that I'm trustworthy again. It took months before I felt comfortable not checking those applications every few hours. But gradually the compulsion faded. Not because I stopped being hurt, but because the repetition of her honesty slowly began to build a new foundation. We started seeing a therapist named Paris in August. She worked out of an office in downtown Clearwater, and we saw her every Thursday evening for 8 months. The first session was awkward and painful. Paris didn't ask us whose fault the affair was or whether we should stay together. She simply asked us to describe our marriage, how we'd met, what we'd loved about each other when things had started to feel different. I talked about how Lily had become distant, how I'd internalized that distance as something I needed to accept rather than address. How I'd convinced myself that every marriage felt this way after 20 years, that passion naturally faded and you just learned to live with companionship. Lily talked about feeling invisible. Not because I was unkind, I'd never been unkind. But because I'd stopped seeing her. She'd become a character in my everyday routine rather than a person I was actively choosing to love. She'd started to disappear, literally and figuratively, looking for situations where someone would actually notice her. That's not an excuse for what I did, she said to Paris and to me. It's just context. It's just an explanation. Paris worked with us on communication, on vulnerability, on the terrifying practice of being honest about what you actually needed rather than what you thought you should need. We talked about my first marriage, about how that trauma had made me approach relationships defensively. We talked about how Lily's childhood, her parents were distant, emotionally unavailable, had shaped how she interpreted love and attention. None of this erased what she'd done. But it provided context for how we'd both become the people who could let this happen. My brother Owen was skeptical about the whole process. He visited one evening and found me in the kitchen, preparing dinner. "You're actually cooking?" he said. "Dude, she cheated on you. Why are you cooking?" Because I want to, I told him. Because cooking together used to be something we enjoyed and I want to reclaim that. You're making this too easy on her, he said. But I noticed he didn't leave and he accepted the dinner invitation. My sister Naomi was more supportive, though she had her own concerns. Make sure you're doing this for you, she told me. Not because you think it's what you should do. Not because you're afraid of being alone. Make sure it's what you actually want. That was harder to answer than I would have liked. The hardest part wasn't the initial confrontation or even the first weeks of therapy. It was the middle months, when the novelty of working on the problem had worn off but the actual progress was still uncertain. When I'd have good days where I genuinely believed we could rebuild, followed by days where a particular smell or a specific time of day would remind me of Tom, and the rage would come flooding back. Kevin seemed to sense the fragility of everything. The cat became more clingy than usual, spending more time on our laps, as if his presence could hold the household together. Lily would sometimes sit with him for hours, just stroking his fur, and I'd leave her alone because I understood that the cat was providing something I wasn't capable of providing in those moments. We established new routines. We stopped eating dinner in front of the television and instead sat at the table together. We talked about our days, really talked instead of the abbreviated summaries we'd fallen into. Lily would tell me about her new job, about the people she was working with, about challenges she was facing. I'd tell her about my cinematography projects, about the clients I was working with, about my fears and frustrations. These conversations felt stilted at first, like we were following a script that Paris had provided. But gradually they became natural again. The conversation began to flow like it used to, when we'd first met and couldn't stop talking to each other. 3 months into therapy, I asked Lily if she was still in contact with Tom. No, she said immediately. I cut off all contact the day after you found out. He tried to message me a couple of times, but I never responded. Do you think about him? I asked. She was quiet for a long moment. Sometimes, she admitted. Not in a romantic way. But I think about the version of myself that he showed me, the version who felt alive. I think about how I need to find a way to feel like that without needing someone else to show it to me. It was honest. It was uncomfortable. But it was honest. By autumn, things had shifted noticeably. Lily started wearing jewelry that I'd given her years ago, pieces she'd set aside in her jewelry box and apparently forgotten about. She started asking about my cinematography work with genuine interest, asking to see the footage I was editing, offering thoughtful comments. One evening in October, she surprised me by suggesting we take a weekend trip. Somewhere neutral, she said. Somewhere neither of us has memories of me and Tom. We drove to Key West. It was 7 hours in the car and we talked the entire way. We talked about our plans for the next 5 years, about whether we wanted to travel more, about what we wanted to do after retirement. We talked about things we'd stopped discussing somewhere along the way, real plans, actual dreams, a future that we both felt invested in. We stayed in a small hotel near the waterfront and spent our days walking through the town, visiting museums, eating at local restaurants. One evening, sitting on a porch watching the sunset, Lily took my hand. I'm sorry, she said. I've said it before, but I want to say it again, really mean it. I'm sorry for what I did and for letting us get to a place where I felt like I needed to do it. I squeezed her hand. I'm sorry for becoming someone you couldn't talk to. I'm sorry for checking out of our marriage without checking out of you, if that makes sense. It does, she said. We didn't fix everything on that trip. Betrayal doesn't work that way. It doesn't just disappear after a weekend in the Keys or 8 months of therapy sessions. But we started to see each other again, really see each other, in a way we hadn't in years. By December, Paris told us that she believed we'd made significant progress. She didn't suggest we were fixed. She was too experienced to use a word like that. But she indicated that we'd done the work necessary to rebuild a functional relationship and that continued therapy at this point might actually be holding us back from doing the independent work we needed to do. What does that mean? Lily asked. That we're done. It means you've built new tools, Paris said. New ways of communicating, new ways of approaching problems. Whether you use them consistently is now up to you. I think you're ready to do that. Our final session was in Paris's office in downtown Clearwater. We sat on the same couch we'd sat on every Thursday evening for 8 months, and Paris asked us what we'd learned. Lily went first. I learned that I have to communicate what I need, not just expect someone to guess. I learned that feeling alive and being in a healthy relationship aren't mutually exclusive, but only if I'm willing to do the work to maintain the relationship instead of abandoning it. I spoke next. I learned that I was checking out of my marriage long before Lily checked out. I learned that I let myself become lazy about love, and that laziness created the space for this to happen. I learned that I have to actively choose this relationship, every single day. Paris smiled. I think you both understand what this means. I think you have a real chance here. Use it wisely. That evening Lily and I went to dinner. We chose a restaurant we'd gone to many times before, a small Italian place in downtown Clearwater that made fresh pasta. We ordered wine, ordered food, and sat together as the evening descended around us. I want to tell you something, I said. And I need you to know that I'm telling you this because I want us to move forward from here without secrets. Lily looked nervous. What? I bought bearer bonds. $40,000, through a financial advisor. I did it right after I found the hotel receipts but before I confronted you. I was preparing for the possibility that we'd get divorced. She went pale. You were going to hide money from me? I wasn't going to hide it from you in a divorce settlement. But I was going to have it available in case I needed to start over. In case the destruction I was planning required me to rebuild from nothing. She set down her fork. Do you still have them? Yes. Are you going to use them? I looked at her across the table, this woman I'd spent 20 years with, this woman I was choosing to stay with despite everything. No, I said. I'm keeping them because part of me still believes this could fall apart. But I'm not going to use them. I'm going to trust that you've made the same choice I have, that you're choosing us every day. Tears filled her eyes again. They did that often these days. I am, she said. I'm choosing us. Every single day I wake up and I choose this. I choose you. I choose our marriage. I choose the possibility that we can be happy again. We didn't become new people after that moment. We didn't suddenly forget that Tom had existed or that Lily had felt unfulfilled for so long. But we became people who could look at those facts and say, this happened, it was bad, and we survived it. We became people willing to do the work necessary to ensure it wouldn't happen again. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and click like if you enjoy this story. I always read your comments and analyze which stories you like best so that I can create better stories. Thank you. I will continue the story. A year after the confrontation, we visited Paris one more time. Not as regular therapy clients but as people checking in. We sat in her office and she asked us how we were doing. Better, Lily said simply. Not perfect but better. I still have days where I feel guilty, where I think about Tom and remember why I did what I did. But I also have days where that memory doesn't affect me at all. Where I go the entire day without thinking about him. I nodded. The anger is gone. There are still moments when I remember something specific and feel a flash of something. Not quite anger but maybe a reminder of what I was capable of feeling. But mostly I just feel like we're moving forward. And the bearer bonds? Paris asked me, a slight smile on her face. Still in the safety deposit box, I admitted. But I think about them less and less. Eventually I'll probably liquidate them or give them to charity. Right now they're like a museum piece of a person I used to be, worth keeping just to remember that I'm not him anymore. We left Paris's office that evening, driving back to Island Estates as the sun set over the water. Kevin was waiting for us at home, demanding dinner with the imperious mewing that only cats can manage. I cooked pasta, Lily's favorite recipe, the one she taught me years ago. We sat at the table together, Kevin weaving between our ankles, and talked about the weekend, about Lily's new project at work, about a cinematography gig I'd landed for a commercial shoot. It wasn't the grand passion of new love. But it was something real. Something built on the foundation of choosing each other, not just finding each other. 20 years is a long time. Long enough to know that nothing is guaranteed. Long enough to understand that every relationship requires a daily decision to show up. Long enough to learn that betrayal, while devastating, doesn't have to be the final word on a story. I'd prepared to destroy everything. In the end I chose to preserve it instead. That choice, that small, difficult, continuous choice to stay and work and forgive, became the most important decision of my life. Thank you for watching this video. YouTube may no longer suggest my channel to you, so subscribe to it to receive new interesting stories. You will also help the channel grow and improve the quality of its content. The screen now displays a playlist with other interesting stories that you can listen to. You can also write in the comments what stories you would like to see on the channel.